don't stop, JP. We don't stop. Celtic are sitting top of the league, I think, for the first time since we started doing the ACSOM Bulletin. Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. As you know, I'm John Dykes. I'm joined by my Thursday comrade, JP Mason. We are going to be talking about the aftermath of last night. Going into the game, get the klaxon out. Here's the first name drop of the afternoon. JP, I got a text from our pal Mikey Galloway, and he says, "Paul, we're going to beat them 3-0. I don't know if he's a betting man, but at that point, I'm going, I love your positivity, Mikey. Talk me through your night first before we look at the game, which probably like yourself, I've had to watch back this morning to make any sense of it. Talk me through your night going to that match and the aftermath, JP.
Well, it could have probably been a lot more drunken than it ended up, being. I had some domestic kitchen appliance issues yesterday afternoon, which had to be taken care of. They are still ongoing. So that prevented me from getting to the pub at an earlier hour, although I did hear that many of the Celtic bars in Glasgow were filled to the brim by mid-afternoon. Brazenhead put out a tweet saying, we're at capacity. I think it was about 2 p.m. or something like that. So that ruled that out as a possibility. But yeah, I just went round to my pal Chris's before the game. I had a few beers and got a very nice meal from the Denniston Barbecue. Recommend it, by the way. The vegan options as well. And,
Nice.
And then went to the game and headed down past the Loudon Tavern, the Bristol Bar, those beacons of hospitality in the East End of Glasgow.
Yes.
And then, went down the road, saw Celtic Park from a distance. It's the first time I think I've walked down that way, before a game at night. And it was amazing just seeing the Celtic Park on the horizon, just over the Forge. And it just kind of looked a bit ominous. And I felt good things on the way there as I started to get closer to the ground. And then...
Were you feeling good? Were you feeling the confidence growing? Aye.
Yeah, I was. I mean, despite... some people trying to pour cold water on things yesterday. Some friends asking me if I would quote unquote take the draw. I'm like, unless you've not been watching or paying attention, don't really think going for a draw is in this team or this manager's vocabulary. It's just not. So I was fully up for the 3 points and hoping for that. And it was great. As soon as you walked into the stadium, you knew it was going to be one of those nights. Just there was an atmosphere in the stadium last night that only comes around every now and then. And in fact, I remarked afterwards to a wee guy I met in the pub who's a lot younger than me. In fact, he helped me get into Malone's bar. So thank you, Barry. But I said to him, I was like, look, I was at the 6-2 game, and that's up there with 6-2, like 100%. And he was like, whoa, you were there? And I was like, it's like when you speak to somebody that's younger than you and you sort of say, I was at that game, and he was kind of taken aback because obviously all he's seen is the goals, the footage, and everything else that's been played over and over, the celebrations and stuff like that. But yeah, last night, a full house of Celtic fans, potentially the biggest ever attendance at Celtic Park. That's yet to be confirmed. I saw someone asking JP Taylor yesterday if it indeed would be because of the fact that there was no segregation. So we'll wait on clarity for that. But if that is the only time that ever happens, I'm very, very glad I was there because I missed the Barca game. And that always will stick in my throat that I missed that game. And I'm just so glad I was there last night. And it went a long way to making up for the absolute hell that we've gone through, on and off the park in the last couple of years. But I'm sure we'll get to that.
Yeah, and we will get to the game and we'll have a look through some of the performances last night. You're right, the ticker tape all day yesterday was the amount of days it had been since we last beat Rangers, and you're looking at that thinking, right, this needs to stop. We were talking about getting the monkey off our back. But last night, talking about going to the game, 6-2 game, I've mentioned on the podcast before, people will think you're insane for doing this, but I was actually at Reading Festival watching Rage Against the Machine at around about that time, that night anyway. And the interesting thing is, 22 years ago, so if you think about it, when I went to my first game in 87, if I'm talking to someone like that point of reference you had last night with Barry, who got you into Malone's, you're talking in such a way that you're talking about 1965. So if I go to my first game in 87 and somebody talks to me about a game that was played that long ago, you're 65, you're Jock Stein coming in, you're winning the Scottish Cup against Dunfermline. That's hard for me to get my head around that, right? Because I don't look back on the 6-2 game as being that long ago. The disparity between 65 and 87 compared to now in the 6-2 game, that blows my mind. Maybe I'm just getting old. But last night, I'm going to have to say this, within the studio, we have Kelvin, who's never really been, going to Celtic Park and taking in the games. He's been too busy building his career in videography. He was at the game last night. So I was asking him throughout the night and this morning, what was the experience like? Because my first experience of a Celtic Rangers game was back in the early 90s in the jungle. They beat us 3-1. Tony Mowbray scored. It was raining all day. You were soaked to the bone. So my first experience of that fixture wasn't as good as Kelvin's, but we are showing him the way of Celtic, JP. And last night, big shout out, got to remember this, big shout out to Tony Hutton, who helped out a member of ACSOM to get to the game. I think we were well represented at Celtic Park last night. And there's a few things. We fired up a video onto the YouTube, You'll Never Walk Alone, but there were so many moments where you were just thinking, I'm glad somebody like our Kelvin is seeing this for the first time. I've had people over from Germany taking them to Celtic Park, and the atmosphere wasn't great. It was a 3:00 game against Hearts on a Saturday, and you think to yourself, I just wish it was a better atmosphere. So last night was absolutely electric. At no point during that game, JP, did I think, the Glasgow derby's better when the Rangers fans are at it. I'm sorry, I just didn't think that last night. I wasn't thinking that. It didn't enter my mind. I know that's a debate for another day. But we go into the game and there was a sense of confidence, but that's simply down to our performances. All I heard in the media leading up to this game was the signing of Aaron Ramsey. That was the biggest story going into this game. And what Ange done, he's basically prepared his team. McGregor made it. Let's start off with that. So McGregor plays, and those images, when you look, I'm one for Celtic history. If anybody that knows me knows how much I love the history. I love the old footage, the old images, and they're the types of images that are going to be iconic in years to come, JP. People will be saying, he's worn that. What's the circumstances of McGregor wearing that mask, And I'll tell you what, he didn't approach the game any differently. It was still a combative performance. He was getting stuck in, I thought, from the first minute. I just thought, right, he's testing himself here, because if someone was to have smashed into him, there would have been a gasp in the stadium. But what a captain's performance. And I think, the people that have stood up to the plate, i.e. Near Beaton, who wasn't available for selection last night, have done so well. But when you bring somebody like McGregor back into the side and, when that team line is read out an hour before kickoff and you start to grow in confidence again, how important was his performance? A lot of the time, JP, it goes under the radar.
Well, it hasn't for me. I think it was after the Ross County game in Dingwall, which has obviously proved to be significant so far this season in that, we got 3 points at Dingwall and they didn't. And, despite the nature of us getting the 3 points, we still got them, whether you want to say it was last minute or not. But McGregor that night, I don't know if it was because I was a proximity to the pitch, but I just found myself almost like Sky player cam going on to McGregor that night, and I just watched him, and I watched how he was orchestrating the midfield, how he was asking for the ball, how he was turning on the pivot and looking at the game, and it was slowed down for him, and he could just pick his passes, and it might not have. I don't know. The stats guys will be able to say what he did or didn't do that night and whether it was anywhere different to how he normally plays. But that night, I don't know, I saw something in him that made me think he's operating at a completely different level and really does look like, a guy that probably if a club was to come down in for him from down south, then he would be commanding a hefty fee. There's all talk of fees for players at the other side of the city and everything else, and that's his maybe. But concentrating on Callum McGregor, he's a Premier League player without a shadow of a doubt. And last night, I think almost for last night that it wasn't a good thing that he was missing the past 2 games, but I think, for him being out of those 2 games and not being able to be involved as the captain, to be able to come back in for last night's game, having sat on the sidelines and watched, I mean, if he was already at this, in terms of being up for it, it just probably went through the roof. And there was a moment towards the end of the game where James Forrest ended up in a bit of an entanglement with a couple of players, maybe a Rebo, somebody else, and he was on the ground and he was trying to get back up and play on. And I think we might have got a free kick, but McGregor came over and just absolutely screamed at him and punched his fist like that and celebrated.
I can't believe you brought that up, mate, because I was going to mention that moment.
Did you see it?
You mention it. I was just behind that, but I can't believe you mentioned it, because what I thought about was, in amongst all the changes, in amongst all the new faces and all the new players, there you've got the absolute heartbeat of the Celtic team. Yeah. The 2 of them. I'm talking about, the guys that... This is Jamesy Forrest's 13th season playing for Celtic. So what you've just said there, it crossed my mind, that sentiment of the 2 of them. They've been in it together for so long, JP, and they are still the heartbeat. I know James Forrest at the moment isn't a first pick in that side, but when I saw that, that's what crossed my mind, and I was going to bring that up as well, because I've watched the game again this morning, because a match like that, you're so emotionally involved. I mean, see, when you've seen that, what are you thinking? Are you thinking the same as me? That's the identity right there. In amongst all the change, we've still got that heartbeat there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, they might not be the personality that is Scott Brown. They're not maybe cut from that type of cloth like James Forrest. No offence to him, but he's not really, a personality. He's not a wind-up merchant in any way. He's just been, consistent across his time. He's won who knows how many titles and trophies now, and his appearances for the club is through the roof. I mean, he must be, there or thereabouts in the all-time appearances charts now. Or I mean, you'll know.
He's over 400, so he's edging into that 500 territory, and there's only been 13 players made 500 or more appearances for Celtic.
There you go. Aye, so but I just thought it was great to see 2 Scottish guys who obviously love playing for Celtic. There's chat always about Callum McGregor and his family background and everything else. I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that at all. He celebrated a goal as a ball boy, and last night he celebrated a goal as a captain. So there you go. I mean, what more do you want from a guy? It was amazing, and we were 3-0 up at that point. It's not as if we were chasing the game or anything like that. We were 3-0 up. The game was won, and going by one of their players, they probably shouldn't have come out for the second half, because it was previously said that at 3-0 down at Hampden, the game was over. Or 3-1 down, was it? I don't know. There had a goal in it, but anyway, I was delighted to see that, and it just makes you, as much as I love the players that have come in that are just starting to get Celtic, like guys like Matt O'Reilly and things like that, who's just sort of wandering about with stars in his eyes, going, how the hell am I playing in this football environment? It's great to see Scottish players who you've been through the mill with. You've been through the mill with James Forrest and Callum McGregor, the good times and the bad times. They know how horrendous it was last season with nobody in the stadium and watching that team run away with a title because we didn't handle COVID well as a club. I will always stand by that. I said it this morning to someone on the phone. I said, we didn't win the league last season because we didn't handle COVID well as a club, and we made bad decisions, and the club was a mess going into COVID. So when you suddenly have to deal with a global pandemic, if your club's already in a bit of a mess and you're just sort of getting by, then something like that's going to completely derail you. And it did. We were a flaming wreck at the side of a motorway, and Rangers were a car in cruise control, just like that. They didn't even need to put the foot to the floor. And by the way, on that note, I was turned into a meme at some point. I can't remember when, but one of these guys, I'm not going to mention his name, give him any credit. He'll definitely not be watching just now, that's for sure, because this is a show for the good guys and the good guys only, and girls. But he put me in a thing because I said so. I stumbled over my words and said, we'll put our feet under throats or something like that. I can't remember what it said, but last night in the first half, we put our foot on their throat and left it there. And by God, if it wasn't for McGregor, this would be a different podcast. I might not be here for it that way.
100%. Well, if you got into your bed at 3 this morning, mate, if it was going to be 4 or 5 at half time, yeah, I probably would have been going solo with my Liam Gallagher mug. By the way, you might have noticed this season, I am superstitious, by the way, right? That used to be the Ian Brown mug, and it's got nothing to do with his anti-vax sensibilities, but it's not made an appearance. It's not been smashed, but I thought I'd change it this season, JP. So he's not going to make an appearance as of now. Right. He just can't. I mean, I love the roses and that, but he just can't because I'm superstitious that way. You mentioned that, a couple of things when talking about Callum McGregor. He celebrated as a ball boy, and I was going to say this: the ball boy basically taking the you-know-what out of Alan McGregor, right? Which was brilliant in itself, but then accepting the applause from the Celtic fans behind the goal, it was just superb. But also, people go on about certain backgrounds of players, and we've had them all through our career. And obviously, some of the most famous Celts were Rangers supporters. Kenny Dalglish being an obvious example. And I actually asked, and it's in my first book, I asked Danny McGrain if he was like, I've never supported Rangers. So that's in my book. He expels that out the water. He says, I was never a Rangers fan. But there's a few players down the years, and one of them obviously Simon Donnelly's a Rangers fan. His dad was at Rangers. He gets a chance to sign for Celtic when he's at Queen's Park. If anybody's got any doubts about Simon Donnelly being a Celtic fan, right, watch the Celtic TV footage that I watched this morning. And Jerry McCulloch feverishly trying to switch down the mic of Simon Donnelly when we scored the third goal because he was going absolutely bananas when we scored that goal. And in actual fact, talking about Donnelly, that tracksuit you're wearing is from Donnelly's time, That's from that kind of era, Tommy Burns, Billy Stark time. Yeah. Although it was McCarry that gave him his debut, Donnelly was there or thereabouts the squad. Mate, tell me, is it an original? Because it's an absolute cracker.
It is. Sorry, my glasses are steaming up here. It is an original. My dad got me the full tracksuit when I was a wee guy, and people are maybe the same age, and maybe even now it's still a thing. Like if you get a full tracksuit as a wee guy, it's a big deal. It's like it's like a suit, isn't it? It's like getting a Celtic suit, and my dad got me this. We came through at Christmas time, I think, and me and my dad used to always come through to Glasgow from Bathgate at Christmas time, and we'd go to Fraser's and Arnott's, and I'd go to see Santa and stuff like that. Maybe not at 13, but yeah, I remember getting the full trackie. The trackie bottoms are long gone. I don't know what happened to them. They didn't actually have a Celtic badge on the trackie. It was just black tracksuit bottoms with an Umbro badge. There was no Celtic badge, so maybe I didn't place too much importance on them, but the trackie tops survived. It's a bit of a weird fit because it's got the kind of bat wings, but it's it means a lot to me because my dad got me. It also means a lot to me because it represents a time that some people aren't privy to in terms of Celtic's past. You're saying you went to your first Rangers game in 91, did you say? I went 93, and we won 2-1, Peyton and Collins. So,
yeah.
It was towards the end of the season. Mark Hateley got a goal back with about 20 minutes to go or something like that. So yeah, it's just I just thought I'd stick it on for your amusement.
No, I love it. And the fact that it's a genuine article as well. I mean, some of these companies are obviously making some very good remakes because it's the only way you can get your hands on a lot of the stuff. But cracking, genuine article. I want to talk about Reo Hatate, man of the match once again. The impact he's made has been astonishing since he came to Celtic. We were in a situation there where we're playing, and it was like almost, the midfield almost picked itself. We were playing McGregor, Rogic and David Turnbull. And that was, I think most people were quite happy. And some folk were saying, Turnbull needs a rest, etc. Well, he got injured and Rogic's been on international duty. And as a result of that, and because of our January business, we've had an unfamiliar midfield. And that was, I've got to admit, that was a concern going into these last few fixtures, JP, because you thought, O'Reilly's never played with Hatate. The guys don't know each other, and then McGregor gets an injury. And when you're watching that game last night, I mean, O'Reilly and Hatate look as though they've been playing for Celtic for years. They're so comfortable. I mean, Hatate all over the park. He was the guy that won possession. Rangers had the kick-off. He won possession for Celtic. And he's basically laid down a marker at that point. He won possession all night long. He's always showing for the ball. He's always finding space. He's astonishing going forward, as his 2 goals showed. But let's talk about his first goal. I mean, at that point, when I'm watching Celtic, it's 4 minutes in, and the composure that he showed. O'Reilly corner, by the way, we don't score for corners. That's another thing. We don't. Celtic's corners of this season and last season, prior to the acquisition of O'Reilly, we just, I've often said, just play the ball short, get the ball back into play, because we're not great, we're not decisive at corners. So it's an O'Reilly corner, but the composure that he shows to take that touch, rather than try and strike it with his left foot, take the touch, look up and curl it. Although there was a deflection, curl it around McGregor. I mean, at that point, the perfect start for Celtic. But how impressed have you been with the composure and the way that he's just clicked into the team, JP? I mean, we've got a real... I mean, I'm talking... We've seen them all, right? In the last few years, we've seen Van Dijk coming in straight away. He's a player. Wanyama, you look at him, you think, right, this guy's going to go down south. And you can almost identify them as you go through. Dembele comes in. I'm instantly starting to think, is he in my greatest Celtic 11 of all time? Is he going to get a place in front of Frank McAvenny? Because he was, and he is now. McAvenny's on the bench. Sorry, Frank. But so you're watching a player like Edouard come in, and you think, right, how this is going to go. Hatate comes in, and he's just a different level of quality altogether. I mean, I'm blown away by the guy's talent.
I mean, I held back with my, glowing praise for him after his first game, which was, God, I can't actually remember what was his debut?
That was the Hibs game, wasn't it?
Of course, and the 2-0, and yeah, I thought he was really, really good that night. But the next day, it was a similar reaction to, I think it was a similar reaction to the sort of Aaron Ramsey signing over there. The people were going mental online about him the next day, and I was like, okay, he's good. Like, he didn't score a goal, and it wasn't. It was maybe people were like, and people will go back now and go, well, I said after that game he was going to be good. I said it, and I'm like, right, okay, that's fair enough, but I said at the time, well, let's see how he does in the next game. In the next game, he scored a goal, an absolute worldie. A showstopper at Tynecastle against apparently the league's best keeper. I think Craig Gordon is a good keeper. I don't know if he's the league's best, but I think he's a good keeper. And that put us 1-0 ahead at Tynecastle in a crucial game away from home. And that made me really sit up and take notice a lot more than I did against Hibs. And then he goes and does what he does last night. And I said, you've got to have room for improvement. I mean, against Hibs, he wasn't a 10 out of 10. I still stand by that. It wasn't a 10 out of 10. You have to have, allow, points to increase based on a goal or an assist. Last night, it was 2 goals and an assist. That's a 10 out of 10 performance.
Yes.
100% 10 out of 10 performance. No questions asked. Anybody that wants to say anything differently can, get to the back of the bus, because that is last night, unbelievable. And you sometimes think to yourself in this day and age that we're not going to see another Lubo, we're not going to see another Larson, we're not going to see another superstar. He's like a really kind of understated superstar, because the celebration for the second goal was like Lubo's in the 5-1 game. It was exactly like that. It was just like
JP, right? contrary to some people's beliefs, these shows aren't scripted, but that's the third time today that you've actually said something that's on my sheet here. That celebration, I've written here, Moravchik-esque celebration, right? Yeah. And that's exactly what I thought. It was. I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't know the magnitude of the goal, but it was just that understated celebration again, and it put me back in mind of the 5-1 game, which we've got up there. We're going to cover that on the Retro Video Club very, very soon. It's up on the shelf there. But I that's the third time you've said something that's on my sheet, so maybe it is scripted. I'm not so sure.
I didn't get that memo, just FYI. But yeah, no, it was amazing to watch him play last night, and to send the place absolutely bananas. Like it was, the whole. What would you say? The whole sort of script and narrative of last night. The full house of our fans, the nighttime game, the fact that it would have been played behind closed doors had it taken place at its original time. And I know that they're still bumping their gums about that, but at what point do you not think that the whole of the SPFL wanted this to happen for all their fans? It wasn't. How can they possibly think that it was like Celtic were, the sort of the architects of this? That's absolute nonsense. And also, why would we not want to have the opportunity to play a full house game like that last night with the backing of our support, who went full pelt last night? Everybody said in the advance, I saw a tweet saying, everyone is lucky enough to be at the game tonight. Go for it. Don't stop. Go for it. Do what the team's done best. Do what the team does. Keep going. Mm-hmm. Don't stop singing. Don't stop shouting. And I pretty much didn't. I mean, I find it a miracle that I can actually speak right now, because when I got to the pub last night, I was like, I was worrying about today, put it that way. It was why that game. Also, they got a game at Ibrox in front of all their fans, and they got that advantage. So that last night evens up. What happens in the next two games now is probably down to them, because that's the next game. So we'll see what happens. We'll probably get our 700 or 800 tickets back, and that'll be that. And then I can't see it getting back to how it was. I just think it's far too difficult now with the way that they've done it, and people have got season tickets there now. So how do they address that? So, but anyway, yeah, that was the Hatate doing that last night. I mean, I've said before about the grounds that these guys have played in Japan. I said about Yokohama Marinos and how big their stadium is. It is 72,000 capacity, but someone came in a few days later and said, yeah, but they only get crowds of about 30,000. So, playing in a half-empty stadium, that's not that great. Kawasaki Frontale, I think, is the name of the team that Hatate came from. You're not telling me he's played in anything like that. So, dream stuff for that guy to be able to score goals that spark that reaction.
Absolutely, that mayhem and the chaos that ensues. But actually looking at the atmosphere within the ground yesterday, another thing that crossed my mind, we always go on about this Holy Trinity where everybody's buying in. And at the minute, I think what's happened, JP, and this is natural, right? And we've spoken to Jim Orr about this previous regimes at Celtic, got off the hook whenever Celtic done something okay, or when we signed a new player, or when we brought in a new manager, and the fans' focus goes back on the football again. We don't start looking at the cracks in the boardroom and all that, and that's exactly what's happening just now, because we're so focused on this revolution under Ange Postecoglou. And last night there was a coming together, and it was the circumstances, the full stadium, like you say, that feeling that over the last few games, last minute goal against Dundee United, we beat Hearts 2-1 and they miss a penalty. That's fine. They weren't emphatic wins and scraping through against Alloa 2-1 away and all that. That's fine. But last night, you knew that game was coming. You knew last night was coming. We weren't quite sure when, and it's all clicked at the right time. And then you see, the wee ball boys are in on this as well. And, the whole thing, every time Hart wants the ball's chucked at him really rapidly. Everybody was buying into it. The subs were warming up. Maeda, every time he comes round, gets a an amazing reception, because you're looking at the guy saying, right, he's just off a plane, and he's basically came straight to no kind of recuperation time. And when he eventually comes on, we'll talk about him and Giakoumakis, but when he comes on, basically just chase everything. Just chase everything, chase it all down, put people under pressure. And I want to talk about that tempo, because it's like, we don't stop. Tony and I, on the Monday, were talking about Stone Roses references and how we've lost, for the time being, I Want to Be Adored, and we're talking how do we actually replace it? And the Don't Stop, for me, I mean, yeah, it's an obscure backwards track from the same album, but I'm buying into it, right? So it is one of the things where the fans didn't stop, the team didn't stop, but the tempo on the park, JP, we gave them the fright of their life yesterday, and we were able to... I came away thinking, and this is a question, are people going to say, again, it's the first half that's got us through? Watched it again this morning. The tempo didn't dip. We just didn't create the chances in the second half. And I watched it back deliberately to try and identify if there was that, 67-minute dip. There really wasn't. And people say, well, there was maybe a period in the second half where Rangers came back into it. There was a 10-minute period before we scored our second goal. Similar in the first half, but you forget that because we've had so many chances. So I actually think the tempo pretty much maybe wasn't at the same level, but it didn't dip a great deal. We just didn't create the chances. If we're able to keep that tempo up, JP, then, on our day, we're unstoppable. And I think last night proved that.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, Mark, that sits in front of me, he said straight away, after about 4 or 5, I don't know if it was before the goal or just after the first goal, but he's just said Barisic is having a mare here and he does not fancy this game at all. And he made that assessment in minutes. And, you only take a cursory glance at some of the comments coming from their supporters today about Barisic and how much of a pathetic performance it was from him. Going forward, turning back, going forward, safe hands, safety every single time. Safety.
Facing his goalie all the time, JP. Always facing his own goalie. Yep.
Really, like it was a really weak performance, and then you look to the performance on the other side of our defence, on the right hand side, his compatriot, unbelievable. Wow. Man of the match. We're talking about Hatate and how great he is. 2 goals and assists and a 10 out of 10 performance. Juranovic was a 10 out of 10 as well.
Stunning.
Out of this world. I mean, one of the best performances I've ever seen in a Celtic jersey. And I jokingly changed my Twitter account last night to Josip Juranovic fan page and just started retweeting all the tweets I was seeing about Juranovic, because there's many. And the traction that they're all getting, all those, not from me, but just from everybody seeing them, and all the other people are doing the same thing, shows you how big a performance he had, because there's you name it. I think I've retweeted about 11 or 12 people going, by the way, how good was Juranovic last night? Absolutely destroyed Ryan Kent. Destroyed him. That guy, if he slept a wink last night, Ryan Kent, I'd be very surprised, because I would just be lying there going, I had a nightmare tonight. I know. And I'm
not even a footballer, one of the nights of reflection.
None of that. Where was all that? All that nonsense. Guys, I've never rated them. I said earlier on in this podcast that Jota's stats would outperform Kent's by the end of the season. You can go back and watch it. I'll say it again now. Juranovic's stats will probably outdo Kent's in terms of assists and goals, because probably has more of them at the moment. Absolutely, ragdolled him. The bit where there was a clip shared where he chases him back, Kent's attacking, chases him back, and then kicks the ball off him and wins a corner, and then laughs in his face. That's what I want. I want that. Give me that every single day of the week. I want Celtic players who didn't want to get beat. He didn't want to get beat, but more importantly, he didn't want to lose a goal. It wasn't a case of just preserving the win or preserving the lead that we had. He was like, nobody's scoring against me tonight. If a goal's happening here, it's not going to be because I've not given 110%. It was a magnificent performance. I watched his press conference as well, and he was already halfway to being man of the match from his press conference alone, just from the patter that he was coming out with. Just really, really getting it. And I remembered last night when I was, drunkenly retweeting all these Juranovic tweets. I remembered actually the one that I put out and put consecrated by the holy goalie, the hug in the dressing room in Legia Warsaw. And I forgot about that, so I retweeted that as well, just as a reminder. But brilliant.
Two things you mentioned there, mate, and again, they are on the script. And the first one is the Barisic thing. All last season, every single game, you could go back to every game we played against Rangers, we spoke about you've got to target their two fullbacks, right? Because not only did we not create enough down the flanks, and we said it all season last season, we felt, quite a few people in ACSOM felt, that their two fullbacks, in many ways, were their most dangerous players coming forward. So you had to nullify that. When you now look at the situation that we're in, where we had no width whatsoever, we were so one-dimensional last season. Look at the width that we've got now. We're tearing them left and right. Jota down the left, Abada down the right. Abada's, for some reason, he's been supercharged.
Second goal in particular, the interplay and the second goal, I think I watched that about 10, 15 times this morning. Just unbelievable.
Incredible. And the thing with that as well, obviously, Juranovic played a part in that. But you've mentioned Juranovic. I mean, there's a moment where some people just want to put the toe on the ball. He's in his own box, JP, and he brings it down. He just brings it down. He pulls it out the air. It was so nonchalant, right? But his defensive display was superb. He was intercepting balls. He was judging balls before he was getting in front of Rangers players. But see, going forward, there's a moment where he wins the ball back, and then he backheels it to O'Reilly and we win a free kick. And it was just like, the confidence has obviously started growing. And this is a player, by the way, GP, that most of this season, I'm picking Ralston at right back.
Yeah.
Ralston's been one of these success stories of this season. There's a romanticism around it, that the kid that just never gave up. He was thrown in the scrap heap time and time again, kept coming back for more, came in, played brilliantly, some cracking goals.
The bar, would there be such a, clamour for him to be named the new captain and, build the team around Jack and everything else? You might want to get him to string 3 games together first, because he's not done much of that in the last 2 years. I think Juranovic was by far and away the man of the match for me. I was really, I was going to say, I was surprised when Hatate got it. How could you be surprised that a guy that scores 2 goals and gets an assist getting the man of the match? It's you can't really argue with it, but at the same time, I just homed in on Juranovic and I couldn't take my eyes off him. It was that good a performance, and obviously that's been shared by loads of other people that have said the same thing.
Yeah, and by the way, thanks everybody for tuning in. We're streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. And we talked just a few minutes ago, 1800 live. So thank you everybody for getting involved. We'll be pulling up as many of your comments as possible. Hugo's Plimsolls. I'd like to personally thank Mr. Howe for bricking it and not taking the Celtic job. Can't imagine life without Ange. Listen, I'll tell you what, it's not at the forefront of my mind, but when you go back to that kind of period of the season, JP, you just need to look back because, we go out every single day. Everybody's giving their opinions at that time. There's reservations, there's disappointment. Ange Postecoglou, not once in that period did he lose his focus. He came into this job and at no point has he lost any kind of focus when he's being questioned, when he's in front of the media and he's getting asked difficult questions, when some fans, some ACSOM contributors are questioning him. Absolutely no deviation from his plan. And now he's in a situation where he's got quite a lot of his own choices in there. People are coming back from injury. We're seeing exactly what that game plan is. But I tell you what, see when you've got, and obviously the title quotes him at that mic'd up training session, We Don't Stop. When you've got him at the helm, I mean, when you think about the belief that he's instilled in the fan base, I'm talking about it earlier, it's a galvanising effect. It almost protects anything else behind the scenes that's going on because we're just so focused and we've bought into Ange. I don't know anybody who hasn't bought in now if they hadn't bought in at the start, JP.
No, well, I mean, I was trying to go back to find the day of the bulletin that I think I was quite late to be able to give my opinion or thoughts on Ange Postecoglou becoming the manager, but I do vaguely remember what I said, and I said this has to be the right appointment. This cannot be the wrong appointment. There is absolutely no way that this can be this. I mean, obviously, was expecting him to win a trophy and be as far ahead as we are right now in terms of the rebuild and the process. But even if we hadn't beaten emphatically last night and we weren't top of the league, I think people still see enough from what's going on that they can say, well, this is definitely the right way to be going. And I remember saying at the time, I was like, I don't know anything about this guy. I'm not going to say he's not going to be a success or he is going to be a success. All I'll say is it has to be, because they cannot get this appointment wrong. We can't possibly allow that to happen after how bad last season was and how much we fell away. We can't let that happen. And everything happens for a reason. I always believe that. And the Eddie Howe thing not happening, has led us to the door of this guy. And I mean, I don't know about you, but that part at the end of his interview with, I think it was BBC Scotland, when he said we had 60,000 people in here tonight, and they might have arrived here with some problems in their lives, and for 95 minutes, hopefully we made them forget about that, and that's something really special. I mean, that's you might as well just etch that into the history books right now as a quote for a meme or a T-shirt or whatever, and I'm talking in years to come that things like that will be remembered. And he's made a point of saying, people pass through clubs and you want to make a mark, and Wim Jansen did that, and he's fully aware that he's making his mark right now, and he's not losing any opportunity to press that upon us as a support and the media and our rivals. See
when a manager says that, JP, and he means it, it's not contrived. He actually means it. And again, it goes back to a point you made earlier that he gets it. And he made similar comments when we were forced to play at a ridiculous time on a Tuesday afternoon for a European game, and how no matter what happens, these people will make changes to their day-to-day lives to come in here. And you know what? They may get into trouble with their work the next day, and et cetera, et cetera. But he really, for me, it resonates with the Celtic support when the manager gets it, because I think that there has been a period pre-Ange where we didn't feel as connected as we're feeling right now. And that's not down to the board members, it's down to Ange Postecoglou, the players he's brought in, the morale that he is building within that group of players. And it's filtering into the stands, it's filtering into the fan base, the positivity. I'm not overreacting. We're not overreacting. I mean, we've already said there was a few victories there leading up to this game where, last minute goal here, we beat Hearts, they miss a penalty, etc. But we knew this was coming. And, there's an interesting point coming up here after Sean reminds us that we don't stop. And it comes in from Davy Beats regarding the injured players that are out. And when they come back in, I have said this a couple of times, I agree with you, Davy. At 65, 70 minutes, if we do take a dip because we're playing at such a high intensity, we're going to have 3 or 4 guys who at the moment are not available for selection, JP, that you can bring back on and it'll spark us back into that kind of same level of intensity. And I'm looking at players like Kyogo, who was missing last night, or Rogic, Turnbull. I mean, I'm not going to put Julian in just yet because we don't really know what Julian's return is going to look like when he does come back into the side. But I would say Maeda, because obviously Maeda was sitting on the bench last night. He might be considered the first choice. We'll talk about the performance of Giakoumakis. But I actually think we're at that point now where you're looking at the bench, and by the way, we've looked at the bench previously and thought, is there a point in making a sub this season? It's happened in Europe. You're looking at the bench and there's no options. Now, if there is a dip in the tempo, you've got 3 or 4 guys you can come on to re-inject that energy back in the side.
Aye, totally. And the bench has looked fragile at best at times, my friend Michael always would say, when I first got to know him years and years ago, he would always say, you can tell how good the first team is by looking at how strong the bench is. And, if we've got a bench that we could potentially, if everyone's fit and we've got a bench like the players you're talking about, then I mean, my God, what a luxury that is to have, to bring players on that 100% will contribute. You're not going to come on and you're like, oh, there's question marks over whether they can do anything. I thought McCarthy did all right when he came on last night. Didn't set the world on fire, but he did a job. And he didn't come on to go on mazy runs and put it into the top bin. He just came on to use the ball well, protect the leads, protect the defence. And Giakoumakis, I think he played well as well. I know he's been a bit up and down. He scores that goal on Saturday against Dundee United. I don't think there's any reason to criticise. It was a great save by Siegrist. Sometimes you only get one big chance in a game. That was his one probably big chance that you would say on another 8 or 9 times out of 10 he's got a goal there, and he's got the goal. He's the hero. It's not a bada in the last minute. Might just be a 1-0 with Giakoumakis and as a scorer, and then that's 3-3. Off the back of Alloa and Hearts. So I thought last night he was an integral part of the team, and they didn't really fancy him at all up top, as they tend to not fancy players with any sort of physicality. And I mean, it wasn't outstanding, but he contributed, and I thought he was worth his place. And he tired. You could definitely see him tiring, but he's tired because of the running he was doing. He was putting in effort, and you just look around the team and you see the effort from other players. You cannot be an empty jersey in an Ange Postecoglou side.
No.
It won't happen. I mean, it won't happen. You simply won't be at the club, and or for very long anyway.
No, you're right. You're right. I mean, that ties in with a point coming in from Gerald McEwen. That display was terrific. Brilliant first half and equally brilliant controlled second half. We don't stop. More than worth getting up at 2 a.m. here in the Philippines to watch. Wish I'd been there. Great. Brilliant. I hope you're doing well over in the Philippines, Gerard. And I think that, I would prefer to look at that second half as a more controlled one where you're soaking up any kind of pressure that comes your way. But on the point of Giakoumakis, I think you're talking about Dundee United game on any other day, because obviously we know Siegrist is a decent keeper. On any other night against Rangers, I'm not expecting McGregor to save 4 chances, albeit 2 of them were in the same passage of play, but 4 saves in the first half, JP, 3 of which came from Giakoumakis. Yeah. And on any other night, you're scoring 1 of them. Yeah. But what I found interesting today, watching the game back, because obviously when you're there and it's on the other side of the park, there's a penalty shout. So you're going by the reaction of the players when you're at the stadium. You're going by the reaction of the crowd who are closest to the action. But watching it back today, again, Giakoumakis. So he gets himself into a position. He controls the ball really well in the box.
Yeah, that's a shove, isn't it? Yeah.
And he's all over him. 2 hands all over him. And I watched it back a couple of times this morning. And I'm going to say it was a penalty. I think it was a penalty watching it back today. If you win that penalty, then you've enhanced your performance, although Juranovic would be taking it last night, I'm guessing. Yeah. But I did look at that first half and I thought, right, how do I rate Giakoumakis' performance? He did tire. There was a few more. Anything where he lost the ball happened 5 minutes before he was taking off. Up to that point, he hassled every single Rangers defender. He harried them, he closed them down. And people might say, well, that should be a prerequisite. I don't think we've done it enough previously. I don't think centre forwards have done that enough. They've not given them a hard enough afternoon or evening. And I think Giakoumakis was a pest. He was a nuisance, and he chased everything to the point where he probably had to come off because he was done in after an hour. So last night, I think he played his part last night. And on any other night, he'd have scored at least 1 goal. And if the refereeing decision went our way, he's won a penalty. But I reckon it was definitely a penalty. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch that one back, JP.
I haven't seen it. I remember thinking at the time, and I asked Mark in front of me, what do you think? And he was just like, He immediately looked up at me and just went, nah. And I went, I said, I remember saying, I look forward to seeing that again, because obviously you see it and you see it once and that's it. You don't see a replay of the game. Defo pen, well, I mean, a Celtic fan is going to say that. I'd like to hear that from a neutral. It was Jack. It completely slipped my mind that Giakoumakis was responsible for Alan McGregor's face looking completely haunted after having to make those saves, because he definitely did. I think he was aware that there was a potential hiding on the cards. If he wasn't, if it was Alan McGregor's form from Dingwall, then it would have been a hiding, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. I mean, that's 4 saves, JP. 4 saves in the first half.
Yeah.
And, you think to yourself, the penalty shout, and we're still going 3-0 up at half time, And again, for probably the 4th or 5th time this season, I'm sitting at half time thinking this could be anything. I thought that against Hibs when we were 2-0 up. I thought it against Alloa when we were 2-0 up, just, in recent times. And I also thought it last night. I thought, this is going to be maybe a 5-0. And it could well have been, JP, it's margins. But I'm interested to know, we have had one response saying it was definitely a penalty. What did you think? Having watched it, am I looking at that through green-tinted spectacles? Who knows? What did you think of GG's performance? Well, David Ferguson comes in to say they had a good game. He was dying to score. He did everything but score. I mean, the header probably of all the chances was the one he might have done. He might have gone left or right, but the other ones were just particularly good saves. And we're bringing in...
He did have to go really, really high to get onto that header. So it was quite hard to get... I'm not a footballer, but it's quite hard to get power on a header when you've leapt that high. He was a bit further out than maybe Ralston was against Ross County, I think. I certainly can't label any blame at his door for... You're right.
I mean, that header, if you use them two as an example, Ralston is attacking the ball from across. The one that Giakoumakis had last night is a rebound, and it's a standing jump. But you say you're not a player, JP, you're the only one on this stream that scored a hat-trick at Celtic Park, mate, so I'm going to bring that up. Martin Bickett, GG did a shift, and Red Scotland reckons that he gives us everything. Superb performance. So... it's one of these ones, people who watch the stream regularly know that there's been at least 2 games where I think Giakoumakis has been poor this season. I didn't think that at all last night. Sonny Liston, Giakoumakis will be important for our European fixtures where teams will play tight and close down the space for the likes of Maeda, Kyogo, etc. He's certainly not the type of player that Kyogo is or Maeda is. And I think Paddy a few weeks ago, when I said, what does he give you? He says he gives you something different. And often that is, an alternative. It's a plan B. And it'll be interesting. Yeah, I would agree with this as well. Kaiser coming in. I think he played well, but he did tire. And when he tired, we had Maeda on the bench to bring him into the play as well. So Giakoumakis going into the game against Motherwell on Sunday, he might be rested. Either way, you know that you're going to get a full-hearted performance. I think when I look at it, especially with all the travel by Maeda, it might not be a good idea to drop Giakoumakis at this stage, but we'll see how Ange lines up on Sunday. Also, again, one of the games where we're dominating, JP, so there might be no standout moments, no last-ditch tackles, etc., from your centre-halves, but I can't go through the stream without once again speaking about Cameron Carter-Vickers. The guy just brings a composure to our backline that didn't exist last season. He wins virtually every header, and he does so a lot of the time without even jumping. You notice that? It's almost as if he just times it so well that he takes a step back from the player he's marking and he just cushions the ball. I mean, I think a lot of the talking, rightly so, has been about Jota, and we wanted the big unveiling of Jota. A lot of us did anyway in January, etc. But Carter-Vickers, in a different way, is as important to Celtic.
I do think so, yeah, and I'm concerned that we don't get a hold of him. I really hope that. I know Jota's amazing, and everybody wants to see him sign on and stay for a couple of years. But it's our friendly police service in the area.
It's always about 5 or 10 minutes before the end of this stream.
I know. I don't know what's going on. Hopefully, it's not anything similar to what I saw last night on Duke Street. That's for sure, because there was a bit of bother at an establishment on my way.
Saw that.
Yeah.
Saw that, yeah.
obviously the start of it. But we're saying Cameron Carter-Vickers. I really, really hope that we can get him tied down, just because. I mean, look at Postecoglou. This was pointed out by the bold Hugh Keevins, who said that Rangers wouldn't lose a league game now between. I think he said about 3 weeks ago. He said the Rangers won't lose a league game, and I was like, why would you say that? Well, I mean, people will say, "Oh, because he's trying to keep the listenership up," and obviously you throw out the fishing rod and go for it, but. If he genuinely believed that, then he's not been watching Rangers that much this season, because going into that game last night, they dropped points at Dingwall and dropped points at Pittodrie. That didn't strike me as a team that were not going to lose a game between now and the season. And by the way, I'm not saying because we won the game last night that we are now like certainties to win the league. By no means. This is a tough league. Teams are better this season. Motherwell will be hard on Sunday. Pittodrie will be hard on Wednesday. These are not foregone conclusions. And as even Giovanni Van Bronckhorst pointed out in his fairly honest assessment of his team last night, he said, this is not how I would expect my team to be in a game like this. He said, but I've lost here heavily. I've won here, I've lost here heavily, and then I went on to win a league in the season that I lost heavily, which would have been the 5-1 game with Lubo, because as much as that was great, we didn't win anything in that season.
No,
we didn't win a trophy. So that was pointed out. But Hugh Keevins made the point last night about the fact that we went for Riley McGree, didn't get him, and then 2 days later got Matt O'Reilly. So it points to the fact that we are finally doing our homework on players and getting in people with the right character, which is what the manager said. Character is a massive, massive box that needs ticked, before he brings somebody in. Mm-hmm. And you just hope that if Cameron Carter-Vickers doesn't decide to stay, that we have somebody else on a list who has the right character and wants to come and sign on permanently. But I mean, you've got to ask yourself, what is Cameron Carter-Vickers going to get elsewhere? That wasn't on offer last night. I mean, I know I'm wearing the wrong badge. I'm wearing the badge, and I'm a Celtic maniac. But I mean, why would you want to leave that?
I know, and the thing is, you can't use the same reasoning behind a lot of the guys who have come in, done well, and then left, in that they've done everything they can do. I mean, this is the beginning of something. It's the beginning of a journey that you're on with Ange Postecoglou. I've thought long and hard about Carter-Vickers, and, we're a 7th loan deal. There must come a point, JP, where you think, right, it's tight. There's a good match here. It's time for me to actually spend some time at this club and actually build my career, because otherwise you're a journeyman footballer and you're going to all walks of life. You're going to any other team who's willing to take you on, and do a deal with Spurs. If it's not Celtic, it will be another team he goes on loan to. And we have seen other players coming to Celtic, making an impression, and they've become journeyman players. Paddy Roberts is a classic example, and that looks to be continuing. And I think that also we were in a position, going back to what you're saying about the strategy is signing players and having backups. I don't think after we spent £4.5 million on Starfelt that the plan was to bring in another centre-half. I don't think at that stage. I think there was probably a feeling at Celtic Park that Julien would be back quicker than he came back. Because why else would you bring in Starfelt, who's so strong on his right side and pretty weak on his left side, and play him on the left side? Because I just think when I look at Carter-Vickers, it's almost as if, right, we need another one. We need another centre-half. Julian's not coming in, and we bring in Carter-Vickers on loan, but he's performed so well in that position, you can't move him because he's solid, right? But because he's played so well, we need to keep him. And, I don't know what his ambition is, but I just think from a footballer's perspective, there is such a thing as just finding a perfect match. And even if that match only lasts for 3 years, JP, come to Celtic, be part of this Ange revolution, and, further your career as a result of it. Because the alternative is, you look at the other loan clubs he's been at, no disrespect, but he's gone to a lot of other loan clubs, JP. He's not experienced what he experienced last night. You know, he's came to Celtic, he's won a trophy, he's experienced things like last night, the European football, the Champions League bounty. And again, yeah, I'm biased, I'm a Celtic fan. But really, where else is Cameron Carter-Vickers going to get all of these things? What club is going to offer him that? I don't think there is a club that's going to offer him that.
If Spurs were to say you're in our first team plans now based on your performances, and you know, you're going to get a fair crack of the whip under Antonio Conte. Is it Antonio Conte? Yeah, it is. That's the man.
It is at the moment, yes. Yeah, at the moment, but it's ever changing. Yeah,
can't keep up. But you know, if he was given that assurance, I would say fair enough, because that's the club that he's come from. He's obviously, you know, worked hard through the academy there or whatever. So, you know, it would be hard to take if he did leave. But if that was why he was going back, then you know, fair enough. And in a similar respect, if Benfica were to say to Jota, we've seen enough in your performances with Celtic that we think you are, you know, first team material here. You know, again, be really hard to take, but that's his club. That's the club that he supports. You know, if I went on loan from Celtic to another club and then Celtic said, we've seen you play really well and we're going to give you a chance in the first team, it wouldn't matter where I was. I would go back to my parent club. But I'm conscious of the time, and I just wanted to say, of the 1,800 people watching, 2 of them are in Edinburgh. So hello to John and Jan. Watch every Thursday apparently. So hello, hope we've enjoyed the last 24 hours. So I certainly have.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. It's been astonishing. It's actually been a really good week. We have hit 7.5 million views on the YouTube channel. So thanks everybody for getting involved there. We're sitting at 17,000 subscribers on there. We are planning massive content in relation to Celtic and a Celtic State of Mind. You will have seen the Alan Thompson interview that went out at the weekend. Really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed chatting to Alan Thompson. But over the years, through writing books and the documentary stuff, and also with the podcast, JP, we've spoken to a lot of Celtic players. But what we're going to do is we're going to revisit them all, or as many as we possibly can, and get them in sit-down interviews like the Trauma one. That's going to be a regular. We mentioned the 5-1 game earlier. That's one of 60 videos that we're working our way through for the Retro Video Club. And there's various other features that we're going to be putting out on video. So don't miss them. They're all free. And we put up daily content. Subscribe to our channel this Saturday. It's the latest instalment of Scream of Celica with Kevin Graham, our very own Northern Prose, the podcasting poet. So he brings another guest to the table. We'll be announcing who that is over the next 48 hours, and that will be out on Saturday. Thanks every single one of you for getting involved. One last thing before we go. Juranovic, 2.7 million. Incredible. Absolutely incredible bit of business.
Ange Postecoglou wearing the mask, as someone said earlier on today.
Like it. We'll take that. Right, thank you everybody for getting involved. Keep getting in touch with us. Keep supporting the channel. We appreciate every single one of you viewing and tuning in on a daily basis, the 12:30 staple. I love it on a Thursday. I've got to thank you once again, JP, for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.